Right after almost taking a one-year sabbatical, Daniel Ricciardo decided to hold the brakes with a reserve driver role at Red Bull, the same team with whom he marked the success of his career. And now, his replacement, Oscar Piastri, joins the McLaren team. It seems like the Aussie thinks his struggles might give him a head start in his maiden season. Let's kickstart this video to see how Ricciardo's struggle can turn into a potential lesson. First off, Ricciardo isn't bitter towards his F1 replacement. Right after McLaren ended his contract a year earlier than expected, let's just say things haven't been easy for the Australian. If anything, it's brought his career to a dramatic turning point where he could either win it or wreck it. Having said that, it seems like there aren't any hard feelings. If anything, his latest gesture for his F1 replacement, Oscar Piastri, makes it pretty clear that the 33-year-old isn't harboring any rivalry toward the man who grabbed his spot on the F1 grid. And while we're at it, can we just say that Ricciardo will be a much-missed absentee from all the action this season, right after the McLaren axe? On top of that, the fellow Australian, Piastri, was actually brought in from Alpine after a seemingly never-ending legal battle over his signature. Having said that, Ricciardo's hoping that his McLaren struggles might teach the fellow Australian a thing or two and make sure he performs better in the upcoming season. As for the team itself, they're hoping that the 2021 Formula 2 champion can come to grips with his car better than Ricciardo, who spent 2 disappointing seasons. And even though he's got a pretty stellar record in the junior series, he hasn't tried out his luck in Formula 1. Having said that, he's still tipped as a potential title winner. Following up, the two F1 drivers are trying to make the most out of it. Now, without a race seat for the upcoming season, Ricciardo took a U-turn back to Red Bull, but this time as a reserve driver. And even though anyone in his place might have been bitter about losing his space, the 8-time race winner doesn't seem to hold a grudge against his replacement. In fact, he's been spending a lot more time with him instead. Don't believe us? Check out the viral picture where the two Aussies were seen in the same car. Ironically enough, Piastri is behind the wheel of an orange McLaren, while Ricciardo is sitting in the passenger seat. Was it a deliberate move? Well, personally, we're not too sure, so we'll let you be the judge of that. What we can say is that the Red Bull man went one step further and gave some pretty useful advice to his younger replacement. It was quite sweet and simple. Basically, the 8-time race winner said all Piastri needs to do is go out and drive. Sure, it sounds like some sort of lazy response to many, but that's all there is to it. In his words, learn, be a sponge, but drive. Coming up, Ricciardo's words of advice for his F1 replacement. He talked about expectations. Clearly, one of the things Ricciardo messed up at was the part where he set really high expectations for himself, because after disappointing races back-to-back, his expectations only seemed to bring him down further. And that's why his advice for Piastri is to not set the bar too high for himself. And that makes sense. Because think about it, if he ends up doing better than he thought, that's great, right? All he needs to do is take it step by step or race by race. And as long as he's learning and improving after every single race, that's all that matters. Having said that, the Australian also mentioned that even though the past 2 seasons were definitely disappointing, both the F1 driver and McLaren had a lot to learn from the experience. If it's not about their strengths, then at least their weaknesses, because now they know what went wrong and what they should have worked on instead. All in all, that knowledge is valuable at this stage as McLaren moves on to this season with Oscar. In fact, that's why Ricciardo thinks that his experiences over the past 2 seasons are a sort of head start for his replacement in 2023. And wouldn't you think so too? If anything, this might help them move past their mistakes. Focus on Oscar's strengths to compete with the other top teams on the F1 grid. Up next, Lando Norris learned a lot from Ricciardo's struggles. It seems like Oscar isn't the only one learning from the Australian's past mistakes. If anything, Norris says that he learned a hell of a lot from his 2 seasons as McLaren teammates. Having said that, the Brit is typically considered one of the rising stars of Formula 1. And maybe if he realizes his actual potential, many say he might even be a potential future champion. We're not gonna lie, there are definitely a couple couple of struggles to overcome. At the same time, his team really can't challenge for titles yet. But even with all of that, Norris has come pretty close to winning a race. On top of that, the fact that he just turned 23 means that he hasn't been able to gather enough experience. And let's just say, while other F1 drivers can easily take advantage of that, it's also something Ricciardo has helped him improve in. To be specific, Norris talked about the Australian's approach to racing and his mentality through tough times, which proved to be pretty inspiring for the young driver. Think about it. After all that happened over the past season, it's pretty commendable how he's been able to keep so strong and believe in himself. If we're being honest, not a lot of people can recover from a setback like this, and Norris recognized that. As someone who struggled a lot when it came to F1, driving alongside the Australian has taught him a lot more than he thought. Not to mention, Ricciardo's driving strategies were also a learning experience for Norris. In fact, we all know that the Australian drove the car in many ways. If anything, that's exactly what makes him so good, and Norris tries to adopt those strategies in his own approach, which isn't easy in any way. At the same time, he says the more he tried to learn from the 8-time race winner, the better he's become. If we're being honest, that's quite the compliment for Ricciardo, because despite everything that happened, there are other F1 drivers out there learning from his mistakes and strengths, making him exemplary. Having said that, we can't help but admit that some of the highest points of his F1 career were with Red Bull. If anything, his move to Renault and McLaren didn't really work out because that's when it went downhill. What's more, the Aussie rejected the 2023 Alpine seat, leaving fans and the team shocked. Let's just say that one of the biggest stories in F1 last year, at least in terms of controversy, was the one surrounding Piastri. When he was in the F2 championship and established his dominance, the F1 community was shocked to see him on the sidelines for 2022. Just last season, he was Alpine's reserve driver, and let's just say, we were all expecting to see him take over Fernando Alonso's seat as soon as he decided to retire. And even though the retirement seemed like it wasn't coming anytime soon, Alonso's exit for Aston Martin pretty much paved the road for Piastri's Alpine seat. So, as soon as the 2-time world champion decided to leave the team, Alpine didn't hesitate to announce Piastri as their new driver for 2023. But it seems like the Australian didn't have the same goals in mind, because right after that announcement, he took to social media to make another public announcement that he had absolutely no agreement with Alpine. If anything, he made it pretty clear that spending the 2023 season with the team wasn't at the top of his list. It's safe to say that the team boss, Christian Horner, was absolutely shocked. Coming up, a legal battle followed the public rejection. On the track, 2022 was a pretty great year for Alpine, even though there were enough tensions between the team principal, Otmar Szafnauer, and Alonso. The team still managed to grab P4 in the Constructors' Championship. On the other hand, let's not forget all the drama they had to deal with off the track. First, Piastri straight up decided to reject Alpine's offer, even after the expected public announcement. And well, that made the Enstone-based outfit absolutely furious. Because think about it, they literally helped with his development over the years, hoping he'd join the team once there was a spot available. But instead, he literally snubbed at the very last moment. And to top it off, McLaren became the frontrunner to sign the Melbourne-born driver, and the two teams ended up in a seemingly endless legal battle to decide who got the driver. Finally, the controversy changed the course of Oscar and Daniel's F1 careers. While it was quite a hassle, McLaren ended up signing the F1 driver for 2023. But let's just say, the entire saga seemed pretty bizarre to the Red Bull team principal, Christian Horner, who was shocked at the public rejection. Let's not forget that his F1 future was literally up in the air. Like Horner said, that guy has got one hell of a big set of walls. Moving on, right after the controversy around Piastri's departure was cleared, Alpine started focusing on signing another driver for the upcoming season. And according to Szafnauer, a bunch of top drivers were considered, like Daniel Ricciardo and Mick Schumacher. But in the end, they decided to go ahead with Pierre Gasly, while Piastri Piastri is set to team up with Lando Norris at McLaren. As for Daniel, he preferred a reserve driver role with a top team over a racing seat at the back of the F1 grid. After all, he's planning to make an epic comeback in 2024, and for that, he needs to be associated with a top team, even as a reserve driver, if he wants to be considered for a competitive racing seat in 2024. That's a wrap for this video. What's your take on Daniel Ricciardo's message to his F1 replacement, Oscar Piastri? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.